After 4 years of sparring and a series of legal bouts that he had lost on each count, Gerry Hutch finally agreed to surrender to the Criminal Assets Bureau. In March 2000, the cool, clean robber agreed to hand over £1.2 million, or in excess of €1.5 million in today's money. It was a case of pay up or else face eviction and possible jail for money laundering.
He had very little choice. It was either pay up or suffer the consequences of being put out on the side of the road and maybe long-term prosecuted for breaches of revenue laws. And if he was convicted, he may well have been sent to prison. He sat down with his accountants and his advisors, and in the year 2000, he signed up an agreement in my presence, late at night, in the month of June of 2000. He handed over on that night a bank draft for $500,000.
It wasn't a happy moment for Gerry Hutch, but I mean, he was coming to terms with an obligation, and the obligation was to produce very substantial sums of money within quite a short time, failing which there were going to be very serious consequences for the family home and other properties.
He was very passive and very quiet, and I would describe him as being in the whiter shade of pale when he was handing it over. It was causing him a lot of grief to have to come to this term and part with so much money.
To end the grief and get Cab off his back, Gerry Hutch sold 2 of his homes in Buckingham Street. The sale brought in £700,000. Cab weren't too fussy about where he got the balance, but accepted a deal whereby Hutch would go into his bank in Talbot Street and hand over £500,000 in cash with no questions asked. But Felix McKenna was still on his guard for any funny business.
We had learned from Martin Cahill in general, when he purchased his house in Swan Grove, he made a deposit of 20,000 plus in a bank in Ranelagh, and within 30 seconds after him leaving the bank was robbed, and the raiders were actually searching for the money that he was after depositing. It was not above the likes of Gerry Hutch's capabilities to organise with some of his associates that after he deposits the money in the bank, that they raid the bank and recover the monies that he was after depositing. That was well within his scope and his capabilities. Therefore, the necessity for a security operation. With the assistance of a large number of armed detectives who were positioned at vantage points in Talbot Street to ensure that the money would not be stolen or that he himself was not going to be the victim of a crime as he walked into the bank.
For the first time in his life, Gerry Hutch walked into a bank, not with a gun or a balaclava to make a hasty withdrawal, but a bag stuffed with cash to make a lodgement.
The monk was obliged to come in with a suitcase full of money and hand it over to the authorities. So Gerry the monk, as a result of the Criminal Assets Bureau, found himself pretty much like the Russian leader of old, the poacher had turned gamekeeper.
The very public capitulation of their godfather demoralised the Hutch crime syndicate. One by one, they began to come out of their hiding places with their hands up and their checkbooks open.
His hardcore inner circle of criminals, Geoffrey Ennis, Paul Boyle, William Scully, they were all individually assessed for tax by the Criminal Assets Bureau.
It got to the stage where one of them made contact through a solicitor and said that he couldn't handle the heat anymore. He wanted to come and make a settlement now before they actually got to him, which was an amazing example of why there was a genuine turnaround. They now knew that this was coming down the tracks, and they now knew that there was an ever-increasing sum going to be paid if they didn't deal with it, and that there was an inevitability about it, and they addressed it.
I'm satisfied that when the likes of Geoffrey Ennis and Paul Boyle and William Scully received their tax assessment, that there was a mini conference held with Gerry Hutch, their crime boss, and their advisor. He was aware of how he had been dealt with by the Criminal Assets Bureau, much as it hurt him to hand over monies. He advised these criminals to pay up and get on with their lives. Get them off your back. That was their attitude.
Operation Alpha was proof of the need for the Criminal Assets Bureau. Here we had a gang of criminals who had carried out, and was well known they'd carried out several major armed robberies, but they'd evaded justice. There hadn't been enough evidence to put them behind bars. Now the Criminal Assets Bureau came along, and guess what? They had a bonanza. First of all, we had Gerry Hutch, gang leader. Hutch settled with the Criminal Assets Bureau for €1.5 million. Then your gang members, William Scully, Jeffrey Ennis, and Paul Boyle. These three between them paid €750,000. Lifelong criminal figure, Matty Kelly. He was also Hutch's mentor and had helped advise Hutch on how to launder the proceeds of various armed robberies. When Matty Kelly was finished with CAB, he paid them €7.1 million.
Well, the conclusion of Matty Kelly was spread out over a very long period of time because of the difficulty in getting his properties to a stage where they could be sold. He had invested very well in a number of properties, and in order to fund his settlement, he needed to sell those properties.
He's the one individual in Operation Alpha who took up an enormous amount of time and man-hours in his defending CAB action against him. He had worked for many, many years building a property portfolio, and suddenly he was faced with losing everything.
Ultimately, the properties were sold to very good advantage, and the monies were received over a period.
Gerry Hutch and his inner circle coughed up €10 million as a result of Operation Alpha. But then the Bureau's net began to spread and ensnare a never-widening circle of his associates.
Derek Hutch, his brother, a drug trafficker, settled for €120,000. Another brother, Eddie, settled for $150,000. Then we had this man who made probably the single biggest settlement with the Criminal Assets Bureau in the past 11, 12 years. Dublin car parts dealer Charlie Duffy. He paid €17.1 million.
Charlie Duffy was a well-known and very successful scrap dealer who operated from Smithfield in the heart of Dublin's north inner city. An old pal of Matty Kelly's, he had turned up in a trawl of financial transactions involving Kelly. The trail led to Jersey, where Felix McKenna and his team discovered the pot of gold, a sterling account in the name of Charles Duffy with £12 million in it. To CAB's surprise, Duffy didn't put up much of a fight, and he signed over the lot to get on with his life. Operation Alpha was on a roll.
I had no concept of the 12 million sterling. That was certainly not appreciated by me until we got into it. The Matt Kellys and the Charlie Duffys of this world, they had no concept that their lawyers' offices were going to be searched or that the banks were going to have to give out information about them. So they freely dealt with solicitors, dealt with accountants, and opened bank accounts.
Hutch's best friend, Noel Duggan, otherwise known as Mr. King Size, the man who controlled a huge smuggling racket in the city for several years, he and his business partner settled for over €2 million.
Noel Duggan operated from Smithfield and Queen Street. The CAB investigation established very close links between Noel Duggan and Gerry Hutch in respective movements of monies.
The start of the Noel Duggan case, to my memory, was a public complaint that he was doing so much smuggling that he was interfering with the ordinary business of other traders. And as a result of that, an operation was started, and which ultimately ended up in a very comprehensive settlement, which again ended up in the Queen Street property being given over to the Bureau and sold, and the proceeds handed over in discharge of his tax liabilities.
In December 2002, Noel Duggan handed over the keys of his Queen Street premises to the Criminal Assets Bureau, and he was not at all happy about it. When I interviewed him at the time for the Sunday World, he told me, "They've taken everything, and now I haven't even got the price of a packet of smokes." But he was laughing. "It nearly fucking killed me handing over those keys. I'm on my second bottle of brandy already."
And what of the man whose downfall led to so much grief? Gerry Hutch today runs a celebrity limousine service. He calls it Cab, Carry Anybody. In 2006, One Irish Magazine's readers voted him one of Ireland's sexiest men. Now, there's no accounting for some people's taste. But the story of this sinister and shadowy character is far from over, and he is still considered to be a major player in organised crime.
Over 10 years later, the ripple effect of Operation Alpha is still being felt. Dozens of criminals have been caught, and to date, the Criminal Assets Bureau has taken in excess of €40 million from the lot of them.
It delivered a message to the Irish underworld that crime bosses like Gerry Hutch, despite his success in evading justice and prosecution, could be faced with losing everything.
But for the Bureau, these people might never have suffered any ill effects of their criminal activity or ill-gotten gains. There is now no criminal in Ireland who can enjoy the fruits of his labour in Ireland.